Welcome everyone to the Common Unity Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Dr. Sanchez. She's going to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, and it's one of my favorite topics because it helped me a lot. So I want you all to pay very close attention. It's very important. Probably one of the most important things we'll talk about this season.
Okay.
And you are going to be talking to a very dynamic person. She knows what she's talking about, and she's willing to share with us today. How you doing, Dr. Sanchez?
I'm fine, Mr. Jones. How are you?
I'm very good, ma'am. I'm very good and pleased to have you here on our show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me, I know you are a woman of many hats, and modern dance, cheerleading, counseling, education, and now you are mainly focused on, what are we focusing on right now?
So now I'm focusing on my mental health practice where I'm a counseling psychologist in Columbus, Georgia. I work at our corporate center downtown. Previously, I was a guidance director, actually working with you, Mr. Jones, which most one of the best times really in my career and in my life, the pleasure. So I've had to kind of wear, like you said, multi hats, but those hats have really taught me so much about who I am, where I am today, and what my focus is as far as mental health and helping facilitate change in people's lives.
That is good to have a person of your caliber in this area providing that type of service, because we really need it.
Thank you.
One of the things that's hard for me to understand is the fact that even though we know, because I knew long before I sought assistance that it was something that I needed. And this was way back in 2015. And I remember the only person who I told outside of my family members was you. And I remember talking about that before I went to get the help, and my life changed. I mean, it was a life-changing experience for the better.
Wow.
And I would hate to see where I would be at now had I not went to ask for the help that I needed.
Wow.
Do you have that often?
Yes, it's getting better nowadays, especially when COVID happened. I think people really they became a little bit more unafraid of saying that I need help or that I'm having emotional issues or these things are going on. We were creeping towards that, but I think that COVID really helped people to understand everybody has a need to have someone to talk to, and everyone has times when, just as you have physical issues, you'll have mental health issues. It's not something that people have been willing to admit in different families and different walks of life, and even in different cultures. People have not wanted to admit that they have those issues. But now that people are starting to do that, it's just making it so much more available to everybody.
Yes, ma'am. And sometimes I feel that there's a symbiotic relationship between mental health and physical health. I have a gentleman that we're going to interview later, and he was almost 400 pounds. And he told me, he said, I had 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot on a banana peel. And he just didn't know where to go with it. Now the gentleman is about 220 and looks like he did 30 years ago.
That's amazing.
Do you have instances like that where the physical and the mental interact with each other?
You know, it is not only is it instances, but it's just so awesome that you said that, because it absolutely 100% all the time is tied together. Physical health and mental health are just absolutely intertwined. That's why a lot of times when people come to my practice, I ask them, so what type of exercise do you? What do? You got to move your body with your mind. Your mind and your body are intertwined. And so if you're sedentary and you're not doing anything, it's easy for you to get in a depressed mode, because we have so many physiological changes that happen in our body when we are physical, when we're paying attention to the both of those things. Serotonin, norepinephrine, Those things are physical parts of our body that have a lot to do with depression. So a lot of times, if you will exercise, you do raise the serotonin. When we get really angry, which is part of depression, that's a physiological response. Our amygdala, which is the bottom base of our brain, that is the little area where our emotions are tied, and our cortex is how we process those emotions. So all of that, it's not just that people get depressed just because of something situational. Many times it is physiological, and we can control things if we understand that our physical and mental health are intertwined.
Oh, absolutely. I like that. I like that.
There's
I
so
know.
there's
Oh,
so
I'm
many,
sorry. Go ahead.
there's so many times when people just think it's all mental. And there's so many times when people don't mind going to the doctor if they have a cold, or they don't mind being treated for cancer or diabetes. But when it comes to our brain, everybody's so worried about what people think that they hide that need that they have for help. Like you said earlier, and assistance, but it's all part of our body. Our brain is a function of our body. It's a huge functionality. So that's why we have to get beyond feeling afraid to let people know that there's something going on inside our head.
I'll tell you, it was a blessing having worked with you.
Oh,
Um, and
likewise.
it was a blessing. And I was so amazed because I would have young ladies, they come into my office, and sometimes they would say things I really didn't want to address. But they were honest, and that part I like. They felt comfortable enough to be honest with me about what was going on with them. And
Right.
those things that I knew I shouldn't really talk to them about in depth, I could
Right.
always depend on you.
Thank
And the girls, they loved you too.
you.
I was like, they always bragged about how Dr. Sanchez took care of them and helped them with this situation. And I started paying attention. I was like, she brings job opportunities here to the school. She brings educational people here to the school for the next level. She takes kids to college campuses and let them see what that lifestyle is like and what they need in order to be there and qualify. Um, Young expectant mothers, she puts them on the right path to get care and assistance. It was so many things that you did so well, um, that made us click as a organization that I think a lot of people didn't even know.
Wow, thank you. But like working with young people and working with people in general, if your heart's in the right place, it kind of propels you to want to do it. And it helping other people, that's another way serotonin acts for me, and I know for other people too, is when you've helped someone else, there's no better feeling for you to see that somebody else made progress because of something that you're passionate about or something that you did for them. So that's huge. I appreciate you saying those things.
Well, let me ask you a question because you've seen it firsthand. I mean, this social media and today's impact it has, especially on the young ones.
Yeah.
Um, I know self-esteem can be damaged. All kinds of things happen with it.
Right.
How would you advise a young lady, say a freshman going into high school? How would you advise her as far as dealing with social media and
Well,
then being herself?
and those are some of the things I had to do as a guidance counselor, guidance director, is talk to kids about that, talk to girls about that, talk to children about it in general. Going into the ninth grade, you don't want to be caught up in social media. One of the things people don't understand is once you put something out there, you can't take it back. And when you're in the ninth grade and you're the earlier grades and you're not looking for jobs yet and you're not trying to apply to colleges, you don't realize that some of the things you put out there when you are looking for a job or when you are trying to get into a college may pop up and give people the wrong impression of you. And when you're in the ninth grade, you may make bad choices, and you can change to become a better person. You can always change, but you can't always go back and change what you may have posted earlier. And first perceptions are everything. And people will see those things and then they will attach that behavior or the things that they saw negatively to you in the present. So you have to be very careful. They have to be very careful with social media. And also social media creates so many stigmas and lower self-esteem for some people because of the things that are transported through there. So I think as adults, it's imperative that we teach young people to limit what you do on social media and don't ingest everything. Just because you see it in social media doesn't make it true.
I know one of the things that you discussed with me before was the fact that you don't just work with individuals, you work with families. Tell me something about that.
Well, when you think about working with individuals, I do a lot of work with custody cases in divorces. And so sometimes I'll work with children individually. But for me, in working with people, I always think about the systemic view of the family, because in a family, everybody plays a role. Just like in a car, there's an engine and there's, the radiator, and there's all those things impact how that vehicle drives. So when I'm working with individuals, even if their family isn't involved, and say I'm working with somebody that has anxiety or depression, one of the first questions I'll ask them is, what was your childhood like? What kind of family system did you come from? What was your relationship like with your mom or your dad? Because those things impact how that person is in the present. So systems and family systems are extremely important, even if you're working with an individual.
Do you think problems have become exacerbated post-COVID?
When COVID happened, it happened different ways for different people. In some instances, COVID brought some families and some couples closer together as they got time to know each other, and they were put in a place where they could spend more time. Some situations, it created some angst with people not being able to connect, or people getting tired of being around each other, or different situations of their mental health, kind of exacerbated some situations. And I think that COVID, even on a larger scale, not just so much within the family, created certain distances from people. Like, just, before COVID, I know I would go into a grocery store and want to turn around and speak or say hi to someone, or in passing with your buggy, you might make eye contact. But with the masks and everything, we became so distant and disconnected. We're not quite the same people where we could be friendly, because we weren't aware of how that person felt, because we couldn't see their mouth or their smile. So it's had a very big impact, not only in our family situations, but, at large.
That's something to think about.
Yeah.
That is really something to think about. And the other thing that I know you really informed me about was how we don't connect with each other on a personal basis. A lot of times because of this social media stuff. And can you tell the folks how that can be damaging?
Well, it's like, so many things disconnect us. Like, for example, even with our phones, with texting, you can't always communicate exactly how you feel when you're texting someone. A lot of times people get offended because they don't know the meaning of that text. Social media, again, is that we see so many different people telling us so many different things of how we should be and how we should act. And then we see civil unrest, and we see political, and we just see so many things, even in the news, that just kind of disconnect us. And it's different than when it was in the 70s and 80s before social media. Someone may have had an idea or a view, but you didn't know about it. So you didn't generally judge those people. But now we know everybody's views. So it's easy to just be disconnected as a whole, as a
A- a-
community.
Absolutely, especially community wise. It just drives a wedge between so many people.
And
Um,
it's like I said, you didn't, like in the past, we didn't know people's political views. We didn't talk about it. But now, because it's so generated, where people are more vocal, and some of those things are best to be kept reticent, where that is your own view. And then you can communicate, and you don't see a person as a political person. You just see them as a person. But because of social media, it's created an outlet for people where they're not as reticent as they should be about it.
we both know that in education, money tells the story,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to personnel. But one of the things that I've always felt, you tell me if I'm wrong, one of the things I've always felt that someone that does what you do right now
Hmm.
should be in every high school and in every middle school. I firmly believe that because of what I've seen at those levels. Tell me what you think about that.
I 100% agree because as having been both an academic counselor and a mental health counselor in the school, there's never enough time for a counselor to address all the needs. And there's so many needs of children who come in from broken homes, children who come in with mental health issues, children who come in who have parents who have mental health issues. It's hard for an academic counselor to make sure the child's transcript is correct, make sure the child's getting the proper school, or make sure the child's grades aren't failing if it's elementary or middle school. The academic counselor in school has some mental health background, but we don't have, when you're in that setting, the time to
Right.
get involved with that. So if there were in school systems someone that was behavioral, mental health, to address the needs of these children, we probably wouldn't have so many dropouts. And we probably, and even Mr. Jones, I just had a conversation about this yesterday. A lot of the inability to connect to kids in the way that we need to is part of the reason for the breakdown, kids dropping out of school and crime, because they drop out, they have nowhere to go. If they have health issues, they haven't been addressed. So another route for them to take. So you're right, we do need to have people with mental health backgrounds specifically for that.
And I really agree with you on that dropout in criminal behavior. One of the main reasons that I became an educator was, after 22 years in the military, I was a law enforcement officer for about 3 years. And one of the things I didn't like was every day in the back of that car was taking somebody to jail. And, some people will actually conversate with you as long as you treat them with respect. They know
But
you're just doing your job. And as we conversated, I began to learn that the majority of these people, no matter what their race, they had one thing in common. And that biggest thing was a lack of education.
that's
And they
right.
said many times, I wish I had went to school. I wish I had done what I was supposed to do. And now this is the life I have to live, not that I want to live. And it was so moving to me after time. I said, well, maybe I'm on the wrong end of the spectrum. Let me leave this, get into education. Maybe we can save some of these folks. And it goes back to what you were saying just now. When we share ourselves within the community, I think that it helps to build in more ways than one.
Oh, for sure.
So tell me some of the things that can be positively affected by individuals getting together in common unity and trying to better their circumstances rather than pointing the finger at someone else and saying it's your fault.
Um, and I have a sensitivity to this. I think that as a community, we have to collectively come together. And I've seen that happen, but I think the thing that's huge is it has to be continued. If the educational system, like the school district and the police department and the Chamber of Commerce and Girls Inc. and all these different communities of people come together, it has to be something that continues, and it can't just be a quarterly meeting or a monthly meeting. It has to be something that is on the forefront. It has to be something that really has a very good plan. And if there is money that's allocated, it has to go to the mission and not to the people providing the mission.
And they need to have actionable outcomes that can be observed. Uh,
Right.
and that way we can judge how they're really performing.
That's absolutely right. Because it's fun to come to, the community to come to a meeting and everybody address what they feel. But like you say, if you don't have action-oriented goals that are sustainable, that's not going to work. And you have to pull the people from those trenches of that economically disadvantaged area and give them a voice to say what they need.
And I know that's another thing you must have to deal with. It has to be very difficult. There's a large segment of our population that really can't, well, I won't say can't, but they don't know how to get help with
Right.
mental health because of their socioeconomic position.
Right. So a lot of times people won't get the help they need for mental health until, like you were saying, until they get in trouble, until they get arrested or something like that happens, or they get involved in drugs, and then it'll be offered to them. Along the way, people don't always have access to if they're economically disadvantaged. And like you said, they don't know where to go. That's another part of that community project that needs to be available. And when it's made available, there have to be checks and balances to make sure that whatever that program is put into action, that there's checks and balances, that they stay focused, that we continue to serve people with empathy. Because a lot of times people with mental health, especially if they're economically disadvantaged, don't get the empathy and understanding from some agencies and that's one of the main things they need is the empathy, because they're not going to come back to you if you act as if they're a bother. So we have to put together programs where the empathy stays and there's checks and balances to make sure that those people get the same customer service as somebody who has Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
I know you remember, probably I think it was a year before I left the high school, we had organized a summer activity, and we brought in the leading educator in poverty and systems in education. She flew in, brought her in. We had her talk to all the teachers, and then we put all our teachers on buses and
Mhm.
took them into the neighborhoods where
Right,
their students come from.
right,
And you could see in their faces the amazement of what they were actually seeing in those neighborhoods. And I think a lot of them, when they came back, had a much better understanding of who they were working with. Um,
right.
and that seems to be a problem. I think what you were partially describing just a minute ago, some folks don't have empathy because they don't have a clue as
Right.
to what these kids actually go through.
They're so
Uh,
far.
and we had a system, I kept a washer and dryer in the back room in my office, and Mrs. Jacobs and Rhonda would help the kids out if they didn't have a way to wash their clothes at home. They could bring their stuff in early in the morning before people could see them, and throw it in the washer, and then come back at lunchtime, throw it in the dryer, and then when they go home, they got clean clothes to wear to school the next few days. We always kept food in there, and they could come in if they were hungry and heat some food up. And we just tried to make sure that the things that they needed, personal hygiene items. I had a shower in there. They could come in if they didn't have hot water at home. They could wash. They could do whatever they needed to do. But
Mhm.
I think that helped a lot
Oh,
with
one,
helping.
yeah, 100%. I'm sure it did. It's like they say, but for God, but for the grace of God, there go I. And I think so many people don't, like even ourselves, sometimes we don't stop to think about what other people go through until maybe you see somebody on the side of the road, with a cart full of clothes or a cart full of their belongings. And a lot of times people get agitated with that. We do need to do something for our city and for other cities when people are out there that way. But then again, that's another instance, a lot of times mental health issues when people are in those situations, when you see them on the side of the street with the army jacket and a shopping cart full of their belongings. A lot of times that's a break in their mental health and they have nowhere to go.
You're absolutely right. And it's like if they didn't start off that way, after they've been homeless for a while, they do develop some type of mental issues.
Exactly.
So it's bad out there, and we do need to address that. There's no way that a country with this many resources should have people sleeping on the street, especially veterans who went and served this country, put their lives on the line and come back, and we can't even put them in a decent place to stay. That's pretty bad.
Right. That's absolutely correct. That's another one of my pet peeves is how we sometimes treat our veterans, especially if they have mental health issues or that we expect that they would. And if we expect that they would, then we need to have empathy, especially if they have given their lives or given such a commitment, to our country 100%. And I know that that's something that you gave many years of your life, your commitment to the country. And so I have nothing but respect for people like you.
Well, thank you so much. We we're trying to move along into this fourth industrial revolution. And
Mhm.
as we move along into this fourth industrial revolution, it occurs to me that many people are not aware of the fact that the workforce, education, all of that is about to change drastically to address what's happening with robotics, computers, artificial intelligence. This is going to change the way that we truly live.
Right.
Do you think that's going to accelerate mental health issues as it continues to grow?
I think it will, because I think that's another uh, facet of how things happened with COVID when we just got disconnected 100% with artificial intelligence and robotics and those types of things is another way of people being disconnected from themselves. And also people mentally feeling that they're not needed, or people feeling that they can't keep up with that of thing. And when you feel that way, then you feel useless. When you feel useless, you feel anxious. When you feel anxious, you can get depressed. So it definitely is something to consider, but it's moving so rapidly. How do we slow that down so that people can be about people?
And that truly needs to be looked at. I mean, I'm kind of scared with this 4IR because most folks don't understand that we're already starting it. We're already in it. And
Right,
I think COVID accelerated it. When you
right.
see how many people work from home now
Oh, yeah,
compared to before and how the jobs work,
right.
um, it's scary.
And even thinking of how before you had your cashier and you're going through the line, making conversation. Well, now you're scanning stuff yourself, you
Ran
know?
into that yesterday. Yes, ma'am.
Right. Or even, before you'd see somebody sweeping the floors down through the grocery store and you stop and you chat with them. Well, now it's a big machine that just goes and cleans and doesn't even, beeps to let you know to get out of the way, or it's going to get out of your way. But that's another of us being disconnected as people.
Yeah. And the machine doesn't need days off. It,
Right.
it, it doesn't pay Social Security.
Right.
Um, it doesn't get sick. So what happens to the people who were doing those type jobs?
Right.
It's really scary. I think right now the population should be getting prepared for the jobs to make for IR work, but nobody's talking about it.
Right.
Uh,
No.
I
Mm-mm.
feel like the job's going to get a little more busy.
Hmm. That's right. Absolutely. It's just a world of ever changing. And with all the turmoil between countries and all the turmoil, like I was saying about politics and all the turmoil with civil unrest and those types of things, that doesn't help us come closer together. It's just another uh, method of disconnectedness for people. And again, it's not about people being about people.
And I was researching some life expectancy things and one of the things that struck me was that Native Americans and Native Alaskans have the least life expectancy of any group in the country. And then next to them are African Americans. But all the life expectancy is going down. It started to turn around and it's going down now for all races.
Right.
Um, what can we do to turn this thing back around?
Oh gosh, Mr. Jones, it's definitely a huge task, and it's got to be a collective task. But it's kind of hard because our politicians are not necessarily, in my opinion, focused on the needs and the emotional needs of people. They're focused on so many other things. As individuals, we have to try to find that bond again. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about physical health and mental health being intertwined. If we can't do it collectively, then we each individually have to make sure that we are well physically and mentally, and that our family members are physically and mentally healthy. If we do it from a family systems theory, then that may populate and it may, spread out to the community if everybody does it. So, sometimes we can't always do things collectively, but what we do as individuals can make a big difference.
I wholeheartedly agree. I see the changes. I remember growing up at a time, and I mostly grew up during the '70s when you could graduate from high school and get a job paying enough to support a family. And those days are long gone. I watch people struggle, and these people were once solid middle class folks. But as the system continues to morph, now what was middle class is going to be a little bit lower than most middle class, and it keeps
Dwindling.
changing for the
Yeah,
work.
right. It keeps
But
dwindling.
it goes back to what you were saying, though. Folks don't concentrate on what they need to concentrate on as far as helping constituents. And I think that's something that people need to look at, and they need to understand that you got to get out there and vote for people who are going to help you.
That's right.
And that's the only way that we can get this thing to change as far as the politician part of it.
Right.
And the other thing that I think is really big is folks need to stop looking at the stigmas and stop looking at thinking about what somebody else going to think about me. And when they need professional help, they need to seek professional help.
100%. Right. And I think, like you said, about mental health, there's all so many different types, like the social anxiety, that's a part of you, you know. And so even though that seems basic, or it seems like that's something that people can control, they can't always control the anxious feelings they have about society. And so no matter how small you think that is, or if you have something to a greater degree, there's nothing wrong ever with asking for help.
Mhm.
Because if you don't ask for help and say you have a child that needs help, if you don't ask for help for yourself, you're not going to ask for help for that child that you have. And it's just difficult, like you were saying earlier, to go through school systems and go through different things with kids, with their peers, if they don't have a stable ability to control things within themselves. And that's a large part of mental health, being able to control things within yourself. And if you're not educated about it, sometimes it's very difficult to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I could sit here with you all day. Um, but I'm running out of time, and I know you have some things that you need to do. So I'm going to ask one last question of you.
Mhm.
What is the most important aspect um, of mental health that you see on a near horizon?
I think because of the things we discussed earlier, COVID and other different things, society, and the things, every time you turn on the TV, you see something negative or something that is scary, or you know there's an airplane crash, or there was a riot, or there was a killing, those types of things. We see those so constant. So I think it's just so important for us to understand that it's okay and it's normal to be anxious. It's okay to, it's when those things impact daily life and you can't function, that's when you need to reach out and ask for help. And I think that I just am so blessed to be able to be in this field and have passion for it that I have, because I want to make sure that people understand. I really want to scream it from the mountaintops. If you feel a certain way and you're unsure, reach out for help, because you can tell a best friend, and your best friend has a best friend, and your best friend has a best friend. But if you seek out a therapist, and every therapist isn't the same, you have to make sure that that therapist and you connect and you feel comfortable with that person, and you keep going until you find that person. It's essential for you to have that outlet where you can talk to somebody and you can trust them, and you can know that that's going to stay in there and they're going to help facilitate change in your life.
Excellent. Excellent. And I'm so glad that you're here leading the charge on that front and helping taking care of all the psyches around here. I'd like to ask and see, I could talk to you all day, because every time I ask the last question, then I have to ask another question. Um, if I wanted to get in contact with you
hmm
for your services,
hmm
how would I do that?
A couple of things. You can go to sanchezsessions.com. That'll give you the information on how to find me and how to set up an appointment. Or you can also go to Psychology Today, and that will also tell you the same. Again, I'm in the Corporate Center downtown in Columbus, in Suite 511, and I'm here Monday through Thursday.
Outstanding. And thank you so much, Dr. Sanchez, for spending this time with us. And guests, I want to thank you as well for spending this time with us.
Anytime,
So,
anytime, you know that I'm here.
yes, ma'am. Everyone, please have a great day and common unity for all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good day.